answered as we go along. So I'm going to start the recording now. And I just want to welcome you to our P6-Loader webinar. So I'm Sue Vermilia. I am in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in the United States, and coming to you to do this little webinar for you so that you can see what P6-Loader is all about. So we have a lot of struggles when we're working with P6, especially getting large amounts of data or data of certain types into and out of P6. You may have massive updates, or you may have things that you want to change on projects or even on global information. And P6 is really, it's a little labor intensive when you're working with data in there. So what we've done is we've created this tool, and we actually created it for ourselves so that when we were helping clients to go over to, a new environment or bringing them into a P6 environment, that we were able to do that much more easily in the ways of setting up data and working with that data. We had clients who saw what we were using this tool for, and so they requested that we make it available. So P6-Loader has been available for, I would say, over 15 years now. And so we just keep refining it and improving it as we go along. That's both from things that we find useful in deployments that we use it for, or suggestions from our clients who are using P6-Loader and what they would like to see with the tool. So it's evolving constantly. So the first thing that is very helpful with P6-Loader is that it can help you administer your environment. We can use this tool to get to global information in your P6 environment. We can get to users, we can get to all those codes and user-defined fields that you can't get to with that ease with exports and using Excel files and things like that. So that is one big bonus. We also have some cleanup utilities that we include with P6-Loader, including analysis of where your global data is being used, what type of projects are going, or what type of data is, where it's being used, what projects it's being used, and how many times it's being used. We also have some merging utilities, and those merging utilities will allow you to kind of clean up your database. So if you have codes that are duplicates, if you have user-defined fields that are duplicates, maybe you have calendars that are duplicates, those utilities can assist you with cleaning up your database. Now, P6-Loader is very useful in developing your projects. You may have, lots of pieces of information that you're getting from your team that as to, maybe work packages. Perhaps you've got codes that you want to define in order to slice and dice that information. And in developing your projects, P6-Loader can handle all of that information and start working with that and getting it out there much faster than hand keying those pieces of data. We've also used P6-Loader as a data integration. In a lot of cases, you have a separate system that is handling your costs, maybe your updates, maybe even things like SAP that you're trying to bring information in from. And as long as those separate pieces or those separate programs can get information out into a spreadsheet or Excel or a file that could be converted to that, then you can take that information and use P6-Loader to pull that information into P6 using P6-Loader and that dump or that data from those alternate systems. This is going to help with team engagement. When we're developing a project, or even when we're updating a project, a lot of times you are getting information from all kinds of different areas, all kinds of different team members. We can consolidate that and take that and actually use it in our projects and to update. And in some cases, reporting is becoming very important to a lot of our companies now, or a lot of our clients. And in order to get that information in a fashion that your reporting software can use it, we can make that all aligned so that when you do pull that information into your reporting software, you have information that is consistent and that is pulling the right pieces of data for the right tag, if you will. This goes along with keeping your portfolios consistent. In your reporting, you want to make sure that what you want to report on is going to be tagged and is easily pulled so that when you create a report for your managers, for your clients, that you have got the accurate pieces of information that is important to them themselves. So this can help you keep those portfolios consistent and make sure that that reporting is accurate. So how does P6-Loader work? Well, essentially, P6-Loader uses the API web services. So everything that goes in or out with P6-Loader is verified. It's validated. So you're not going to get an error. So that happens. We've seen that happen with clients where they have altered maybe XER files and have tried to import them, and it's just brought the database to its knees. And that removes that risk. So it's validated through the API. Now we have some options on how we can deploy it. The deployment can be on-premise if you're using your own servers where you have P6 deployed. We can put it on those servers. We can do a hybrid model. So in the case of you don't want to put it on your server where your P6 is, we can host it in a cloud, and then it will connect on-premise for you for your P6 on-premise version. And then for cloud options, we can deploy it on a cloud. We can use whatever cloud you're using. We can use it with the Oracle Cloud because, of course, we cannot have alternate programs on the Oracle Cloud. So we can use it to as a hosted environment and still connect to those Oracle databases that are on the cloud. So when you're talking about the technology of different ways of getting information in and out of P6, when we look across the board, we have XCR tools, which you can do multiple projects with, but you can't selectively extract what you're getting with an XCR. The support, as long as you don't alter that file, is there from Oracle, but if you alter it, all bets are off. And if you have something happen, they basically wash their hands of it. With XMLs and things like that, or with XMLs, you do have data validation. You will have the support of Oracle for that, and you can do multi-projects. However, for the security and the global data that you're trying to get in there, or a selective extraction, you don't have that flexibility with an XML file. And then previously, this is now not supported and deprecated now, but Oracle used to have an SDK tool, which could work with global data, and it would validate, and you could do some selective things on that. But it didn't adhere to any of the security that you had out there for a user. If a person was going to be using the SDK tool, they had to have full access to the database, or a super user. Now with Excel imports from P6, you get your validation, you're going to get your support, and you have selective extraction, but you can't do multi-projects. The security, again, has to be a project super user type of security, and it's not going to include your global data with that as well. Now, P6-Loader is going to check all those boxes. It's going to you're going to be able to work with your global data. It's going to adhere to the security that you have set up for those users in P6 for that particular user. So if they cannot use it or cannot touch data based on their security in P6, they also are not going to be able to do that with P6-Loader. Again, with the API, the data is validated. Oracle will support it because it is going through the API. And in fact, our P6-Loader tool is on their cloud store, if you will, as a supported tool for P6. And as you see, as we go ahead, we're going to be able to do selective extraction as well as single or multi-projects. So P6-Loader as a whole will handle global data, your roles and resources, project and activity information, and we provide utilities as well to help work with your data. So we are currently at version 15 of P6-Loader, and like I mentioned earlier, we are always improving it. We're taking feedback from clients. We are finding things that would be helpful as we work with our clients, and we are bringing that all into P6-Loader. So it really is an evolving tool. And the items in red here are the most recent additions that we've included with P6-Loader. The ones in black, those are items that have been previously added in, and you can see that there's a whole multitude of information that you can work with when you are using P6-Loader. Now, we have an extraction module that you can bring that data out with. We have global topics that are included in that. We have user information such as security, global security profiles, project security profiles, and what your users are assigned to, etc. And then, of course, we have the project topics, activities, projects, WBS, all of those good things in there. And I'll show you that when we actually get into the tool itself. Now, when you extract projects, you can do one project at a time, or you can do several projects at a time. So you're not limited to just working with one project. If you are needing to work with several projects, you can certainly do that. We can extract and work with baselines. Baselines are a little tricky to get at in P6. You may have to, try to use the update tool that is in P6. It's a little bit hazy, if you will, on what it's actually going to be updating and things like that. It is getting better. You can now see in newer versions, what is going to be changed when you're working with that baseline update, but it doesn't necessarily handle everything you want it to. So we can extract baselines and we can work with those. We can change that data in those baselines. We can also work with those resources and expenses when we're looking at a project. Now, when we upload, that Excel program is kind of our in-between. Just about everybody knows how to use Excel. So if we're able to extract that information or work with that information in Excel and then apply it in our P6 environment, that's going to make things a lot easier because the learning curve on it is going to be minimal. Now, for some of our clients, in the case of, I talked about that integration, when that information is pulled out with P6 or from your alternate programs or environments, when it's pulled out in an Excel format, you could do macros on that format so that it automatically converts it into something that P6-Loader can read. You could do it manually, however you want to do with that. We do have several clients who extract that information from those alternate environments and then run a macro on them automatically, and then they're ready to just be loaded into P6. And then you just load it in, you're done, and your information is there. So let's take a look now at the tool in action. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And we'll take a look at P6-Loader. So P6-Loader can be pointed on more than one database. So just like P6, when you do the drop down, if you have it pointed and you are wanting to work with more than one database, you just need to get the drop down and choose the database that you want to work with. Now to sign in, it's going to be the same credentials that you use for P6 because it is going through the API. It is going to use your username and password that you use to get into P6. And then you simply just need to sign in. So this is the main page when you log in to P6-Loader. So we've got some things along the side here, and I'm going to touch on a few of these today. We do have some videos and things like that that can actually show you working with some of the stuff that I'm not going to be able to have time to touch on today. That's one thing with P6-Loader is there's a whole lot going on out here, and it's nearly impossible in an hour to take that and try to show you everything. So we have our operations over here on the left-hand side, and we can extract data, and I'll go into some of these in detail in a moment. We can extract data, we can upload data. We can extract XMLs. So if you wanted to extract an XML for one or several projects, you can do that using P6-Loader and get that XML extraction out there. You can convert XML and XCR files to P6-Loader files. You can also do some basic cleanup like prefixing information. Actually, I'll just click in here really quickly. You can prefix them, and so that when you import a file, that you have it tagged so that you know where that information came from. We do have another tool that goes much more extensively into a cleanup with an XCR or an XML called P6 Scrubber. So if you have more things than just prefixing that you would want to deal with, please reach out and let us know, because we do have another tool that actually goes further than that. If you're working with several databases, you do have that option of the layouts. And what this layout piece does is it takes layouts from one database and will copy them over to another database. Now, you can't do that with PLF files. PLF files actually use the number on the tables in the database rather than the name of the information or the data that is being pointed to. So if you use a PLF file, you can import it, and when you open it up, essentially it's broken because it doesn't have the same references. So this layout tool can do that. So if you're working with several databases and you want to port layouts, this is a good tool to do that. There's also a whole myriad of things that we can do with layouts, like remapping, analysis, things like that are in this area as well. We have this modules option. So there are particular pieces of data that come out with each one of the modules. And meaning, in the activities, you have these fields that can be done, that can be taken out with the API. If you wanted to alter that across the board for all of your extractions, you could set that here. And then we have the option to back up your database using either XML and or P6-Loader files. So those will, you can set those to run automatically, or you can set them individually in the tool itself. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on these lower items today. I just want to give you the gist of what we are going to be, or what you can work with P6-Loader. So in the extraction window, this is where we can see all the information where we can, that we can touch or that we can work with. So we have user information. We have all your global information. So I would say everything that we can get to with the API. There are some limitations, but I would say 99% of the information that you would want to work with is going to be included in these modules. We can work with resources and roles, and that's including, codes or UDFs at any level. We can work with unit of measures, even roles. We have, if you do use the risk information in P6, we have that information here as well that you could work with. I'm going to come back to usage in just a moment. And then we have our project information as well as our activity information. So all of these modules is what we call them, can be, information can be pulled out or pushed back in. Now, if you are working on a project and you want particular information to be coming out with that project, you obviously need to say, this is the project I want to use. So when you are working with that project, you can, on the right-hand side here, we have our EPS structures. So if I were to drill down, I could go into each one of these, and I'm just going to go into P6-Loader and drill down to the files that I'm going to work with. And I've got, I can tell their files because it's going to give me their status on them. So you can either drill down and find them, or you can utilize the search up at the top as well. So if you know what project you're going after, you can do that. Now, if we go and we want to work with one project, we would just say, this is the project I want, to bring out the information for, or I could do several projects, or I could decide, yeah, I want all of these from this particular EPS node. Now, I'm just going to do a quick extraction just to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to extract out my EPS and my OBS structure, and I'm just going to show you really quickly. Let me get to the right window here. this EPS and its corresponding OBS structure. Now I can click those, and then I can, because it's global information, I do not need to designate a project. So then I can just say I want to extract that. It's going to go out, it's going to extract that data for me, and then I am able to download that Excel file. So when the Excel file is produced, it's going to bring out the pieces of information that in separate tabs. So I have a tab for my OBS and I have a tab for my EPS. So on my OBS, this is the information that I can get for my OBS. And let me kind of give you a lay of the land on each one of these sheets. You can see that there's different colors in those columns. So I have a red background column that is indicating that for this module, my OBS module, at the very least, it's mandatory for me to have that this full OBS column filled out in order for me to work with the data in my OBS. Now I have gray columns, and those are informational columns. So these are columns that are pulled out so that we can see, let's say just our parent OBS ID, just our name of our OBS. So that can help you pinpoint what you're working with. I also have some modifications here. This is going to give me the user that created it and last updated it and the date that occurred. On the orangish red font, these are columns that are provided so that you can rename, remap, if you will, your mandatory pieces of information. Because P6-Loader uses this full OBS column to actually come in, find that, you can't just change it here because it's not going to find it. So we would place that new name, and maybe I want to put Emerald here, and I want to name that OBS Emerald instead. What it's going to do, it's going to go out and find this EAI, and it's going to replace Emerald where that EAI is. So that's necessary for those mandatory pieces of information. Now, anything with a blue font means that this is information that you can edit, you can add, but it's not ultimately necessary to be on your sheet. If you're not working with it, it does not have to be on your sheet. So let's say I'm not working with my description. I can certainly go in and delete this. And then when I save it and load it back, it's not going to make a difference for P6-Loader. It just knows that it doesn't have to touch that piece of information. Now I'm just going to pop on over really quick to the EPS and show you that EPS has more required information. I have to have my full EPS, my name, and my OBS in order to work with the data in my EPS area. So I'm going to just start out with like a basic load. And essentially what I'm doing with this load is I'm going to create a brand new project. And I'm essentially going to load everything that I need for this project. So I've got a project that is completely empty. I could have also created my project at the same time. I didn't have to have it created in P6 first, but for ease of seeing that, we're actually creating this information, I'm just going to show you that we have an empty project. And along with that, I'm going to build out my resource dictionary as well. Now, what's great about this is that P6-Loader can do all of this with one workbook. So let's go take a look at that workbook and see what type of things I'm going to build out for that new project. So first of all, let me hide this here. I'm building out my WBS structure. I've gotten this from my team, and I'm starting to get work packages in, and I'm starting to build out my WBS structure for this new project that I am creating. Now, in conjunction with this project, I need some project level activity codes created. So I can do that. This is going to be the code information that I'm going to use on my project. So I'm creating 3 codes, and I am going to populate their dictionaries as well. So 2 pieces to creating codes is, first you have to define what the code name, the code and what it is. And then second, you would populate the dictionary based on what you need in that dictionary for that code. Now I'm going to build out my activities at the same time. So I've got my project ID that I need. I've got my ID for my activity itself. And then I'm assigning information for that activity as I go along. And you can see that not only can we do, if I scroll over here, I can show you that we've got planning information, we've got updating information. So anything you might want to work with on an activity is available in this sheet. Now, I can also assign code values as well as UDF values when on any area where those are available to assign. In this case, I'm also going to use the functionality in Excel to build out my name for my activity here. So I am using a formula, and I'm using a concatenation. And you can see that it's using this column G as part of that concatenation. Now, P6-Loader doesn't know what title is. That's not a field in the API. So I can add columns to help with VLOOKUPs, with concatenations, things like that, into my sheet, and just title it something that P6-Loader doesn't understand. And when it's loading that information, it's going to just skip over that column. So what I'm using is I'm concatenating my title, my area, and my work package. And I'm using that formula to build out my name. Now, I don't have to copy and paste the value of that formula in order for P6-Loader to understand what to load. P6-Loader knows it's going to take the result of that formula and load that result in, and not that formula itself. So I need to build out some expenses for a couple of my activities that I'm going to add in there. In conjunction with that, I need a cost account structure. So I'm going to build out a cost account structure for my project. I can add my steps onto each one of my activities. So let's say I have several steps that are repetitive among activities. What I can do is build out one and then just go in and change the activity that I'm going to associate it with, and make it a lot easier on myself so I don't have to retype each one of those steps individually. We can also work with calendars. And in my case, for my project here, I need a rotating resource calendar. This is a calendar that's not normally that we use, but I do need this for my resources, a couple of my resources anyway. Now, with a regular, generic 8x5 calendar, it's not that hard to set one of those up in P6 itself. However, when you start to get into calendars where you're counting each day and saying this is work time, and then these days are non-work time, etc., it gets a little complicated, and you may miscount, you may make a mistake on, the counting and not realize it. So with P6-Loader, this is kind of a nice way to produce those calendars, to create those. So first of all, you would define your calendar, give it a name, give it those hours that you want to assign to it. You would then, on another sheet, designate what the normal work time is for this particular calendar. And then you can do your exceptions. Now, in my case, I've used, again, the formulas that I can have in Excel, and I'm calculating that rotating calendar. So my first day off, I've put in here, and then for my subsequent next 3 days off, I've used a formula to increment each one of those days. Now, when it comes to my second set of days off, I've again used a formula that says, okay, on the 11th day after this, after my last set of days off, I'm going to then start with that one, and then so on and so forth. So with those calculations, that's going to make my calendar accurate rather than counting manually when my exceptions are going to occur. I also need a contractor resource code. So I'm going to set that contractor resource, this is for my resource, and I'm going to then build out my dictionary. And we can do hierarchy in our dictionaries as well. So very easy to build out your hierarchies. You just give it that parent ID and it's going to build it out for you. Now here is where I'm going to set up the resources I need for my project. And you can see in this case, I'm actually assigning that calendar that I defined earlier on that I just showed you. Now with P6-Loader, it does not matter what order these modules are in your workbook. P6-Loader knows what it needs to create prior to assigning it. So even if my calendar was at the end of all of these modules here, or all of these tabs here, it would still know it needs to create the calendar before it can assign it. It also knows that it needs to create the code and the dictionary before it needs to assign that to, in this case, a resource. So you don't have to worry about the order of what those tabs are in. P6-Loader just knows what it's doing there. I'm going to assign my resources to my activities. Now I'm even going to start doing some planning for those particular resources. What is my planned duration on those? What are my planned units for those resources? And what's the costing that I'm looking at as well? And then finally, I have my logic that I'm building out in my project. Now, not only can I do the logic on this in my project itself, but if I had any cross-project relationships, the relationships between projects, I can build that as well with P6-Loader, because the pieces of information that are required are the project ID and the activity ID. So I can go from one project ID and activity in that project to another project and the activity in a different project. So cross-project relationships are very easily maintained with P6-Loader as well. So if you have any contractors that maybe you're receiving schedules from with updates, and you've got that tied to a master schedule, it's very easy to recreate those cross-project relationships when you get a new project in, a new update, because you could just run an already saved sheet with your relationships in it that are going to define the relationship between those projects. So let's go ahead and load this in. Let's see the magic happen here. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to go to my upload area now. Now in my upload area, what I do is I just browse to where my project is or where my workbook is saved. I've gotten everything that I need set up and I've saved it. And now I just need to go get it and run it in. So I'm going to open this and I'm going to tell P6-Loader to upload that information. So it's taking all of those tabs, all of those modules that I was defining information for, and it's bringing it into P6. It's going to tell me when it's done. And then when I go back to P6, when I refresh, it's going to go grab that data from the database and it's going to bring it in. So now I can see that I've got my resources that have been created. I've even got that calendar that has been assigned in here. And if I go over to my activities, I can see that I've got my WBS set up. I've got all of my activities. I've got my calendar. My logic is here. My resources and roles are assigned. And I've got my planning that's come in for those resources and roles. And in the case of where I had steps, those are in there. And so really very easy once you get the information you need to build out an activity or a project that you can load it in. And so you could pull that from all kinds of different teams or people within your teams and consolidate that and get your database moving or your project moving. Okay, so another thing I would like to show is working with baselines. So I'm going to open up a baseline project here, or a project with baselines. And let's say, I'm just going to close this down. Oh, actually, let me change my layout here. I'm going to be working, I need to update my baseline. I've had some changes. I've had some units and costs that need to be shifted within my project. And I also have some found work that I'm going to be doing. So I have my baseline here and I have my project. And I'm going to alter my baseline. I'm going to update my baseline as well as put some added work in here. So when I go to my baseline, I would pull out my baseline with my project, and then I would be able to see my baseline activities as well as my project activities. Now I don't need to change anything on my actual project at all, except for adding this found work. So I'm going to add this activity to my found work, and I'm also going to add it to my baseline as well. Nothing's changing on those costs or units. I'm just putting that added work in there. Now, in the case of these 4 highlighted activities that I have, I need to redistribute both my costs and my units on a couple of these activities. So I'm taking from one and putting it to another. Now, again, I've used the functionality of Excel to formulate that so that I can make sure that my numbers are accurate. So I'm taking, this was the original on this TA1560. I'm going to add 90 that I'm basically taking away from 1580, and I'm going to load in that 180. I'm going to take it away from the $90 in my TA1580, and I'm going to adjust those units as well. I'm going to do essentially the same thing on TA1060 and 1080. So I can load this back in. Now, P6-Loader uses points. We do it on a subscription basis. So when we talk about a point is essentially a row in your project or in your sheet. So if I wanted to save on points in this case, what I could do is I could actually delete everything except for those highlighted column or highlighted rows, and I would have saved that number of points by just loading those 6 instead of reloading all of those other ones that, if I bring them back, that didn't have any changes on them. So just a little tidbit there on points and how those are used with the subscriptions. So I'm going to go ahead and load this. So I'm going to again go to my upload window. I'm going to get that baseline workbook, and I'm going to tell P6-Loader to load it. And then it's done. So I'm going to refresh. And now I can see where I've had my debits and credits applied. And then in the case of my added work, that's right here because I have tagged it with add E here. And I have now updated my baseline and added that found work in addition to my project itself. So very easy to work with baselines. It's just like working with a project in P6. Now, a lot of people like to do or have the need to do updates on projects. So we can do updates using P6-Loader as well. So a lot of different things that we can use P6-Loader for. Really, the sky is the limit when you are talking about the things that you can do with P6-Loader. So in this example, I just have 2 very small projects and I need to update them. What I've done is I've pulled out information with P6-Loader. I've narrowed it down to what needs to be updated, and maybe I need to send those out to my contractors and have those update those particular pieces of information or that data, those activities, and send them back to me. So I'm just going to do my first update on this project. And not only am I going to update it, but when I update it, I'm going to actually put information for my units into different buckets of my financial period calendar. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So first of all, I would have received this back from whomever I sent out that update to. And they have marked things with % completes, the actual start date, and the status. So when I load this in, I can just update it. I've also pulled out my project here, and I'm going to update my data date as well on my project so that when I go to schedule, my data date is correct. And finally, for some of my activities, I have some units that need to be spread out. And in the case of my first activity and this resource here, I have 2,200 units that that belong in May, and I have 500 units that belong in June on this update. But for my second set of activities or resources, those are all going to go into June when I update. So we can go into financial period buckets as well. You can also manually designate what buckets planning items are going into, updating those types of things as well. You can also do costs. So anything that you could handle in P6 and update, let's say in the resource spreadsheet, you could do with P6-Loader as well. So I've ran in my updates and I'm going to refresh. And now I can see I've got my milestones that were started And in the case of my activity that was progressed, I do have those units in my buckets that I told it to go to. And then on my second activity that I updated, I have where all of those resources are now updated with their hours or units, let's say units, in that June time period. So I do have a little bit more time. So I'd like to show you one of the utilities that we do have in P6-Loader. And this is going to be one of those combining utilities. And the one I'm going to show you is the utility that can combine codes, and it can also push them down to different levels. So in P6, you can roll them up, you can promote them to a global level or wherever you want to, but you cannot demote them. So in this project here, I've got a little bit of a mess with my codes. I've got some at different levels, and I don't need them there. I have my phase code, which is only important to the EPS that I'm working in. So I would like to demote this to the EPS level. I also see that I've got two equipment codes here. One is at the global level and one is the EPS level, but actually I need to combine these. They're both assigned in this project, but I need to combine them and make them one code. So for my reporting, I can get my correct piece of equipment information. In the way of my specifications, I have two different lists or two different dictionaries for those all at the global level. But number one, I need to combine these. And number two, I don't need these at the global level. Really, these are only important to my project. So I want to demote these to my project level as well. And with my work order, the same goes. I don't need that at my global level. I want to demote that down to my project level because these are work orders that are important to this project only. Now let's see how we will do that. So we have a utility called the activity code roll down. And what this will do is it will combine codes if needed, and it will also demote those codes. So in the way of my phase, I have, it was originally a global one. I want to push it to my EPS level, and I'm going to give it a new name. So it's going to take this phase and push it to the EPS, give it this code name, and it's going to reassign that code in all the projects that I need it to under that EPS. So I need to designate what each EPS it belongs to as well. In the case of my equipment code, I'm taking both the one at the global and the EPS level. I'm saying I want it to be PPS, and then I'm giving it the same name. So it's going to combine those codes. It's going to push that down to the EPS level, and it's going to make sure that all of those assignments for my two original codes are updated for that. And then, of course, the EPS level. And then my specs, doing the same thing. I'm going to push it to the project level and give it a name so it combines them. I'm giving it the same name. And then in the case of my work order, I'm demoting it to project. And I don't want to rename it in this case. So I'm not going to put a new roll down name. I'm just going to keep it that name. And then, of course, I need to tell it what project it's going to. I also have the option to keep the original code that where I'm rolling to or from, or do I want to delete it? So in the case of my first ones here, I want to keep that original code, and I'm just going to make sure that when I combine these and everything that I didn't miss any other projects or anything like that with those assignments on those codes. But in the case of the work order, I know that that one is completely done. I know that I don't need it anymore, so I'm going to delete it. So again, I'm going to go in and I'm going to upload that roll down. And it's going to go in there. It's going to combine those for me. It's going to push them down. And uh-oh, they're not here, but we expect that, right? So in my EPS, here's my new equipment code. And I'm going to bring that over. Here's my new phase code. I don't no longer have my work order code in my globals. In my project, here's my specs, and here is my work order. So then when I go and display these, I can see that they've been combined, they've been reassigned in my project, and I'm ready to go with those new codes that I pushed and combined. So I'm not seeing any questions at this point. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in. In the way of, like I said, it takes much longer to try to get those, to show you absolutely everything P6-Loader does. So visit our website. You could also reach out to myself or others. I'm running out of time here, so I'm not going to go through everything. But feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Emerald Associates is basically a one-stop shop. We have tools with Primavera. We've got our add-on tools, and we've got a number of those. And we have services. We do implementation, integration, cloud hosting, and we also are Oracle certified trainers. So we do have regular open training, or if you'd like to arrange training for just your company. So again, I don't see any questions, but I'm going to put up my information here. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions following about P6-Loader or any of the additional stuff that I just don't have time to show you in an hour. And you can call, you can email, and then we do have a contact in for our people on the other side of the world, and that is Donna. And so if that's where you're located, feel free to reach out to Donna. And again, there's our website. So our website has a myriad of information, and you've probably been there since you signed up for this particular webinar. But go out and explore. We have a lot of great stuff out there. So I still don't see any questions. So I'll stop the recording here.
Sue?
Yes.
Sorry, I think we have one question in the question